TSN Week, hosted by Alamazo.
So what was that and what should we expect next? A provocation, drone reconnaissance, or a rehearsal for a full-scale war, as people in Europe have started to say? 24 Russian drones invaded Polish territory on the night before Wednesday. For the first time in the history of the war, the Kremlin has issued a direct challenge to NATO, because all the claims that it was Ukrainian electronic warfare that knocked the drones off course are contradicted by several telling details discovered by the Poles themselves. NATO began shooting down drones with advanced F-16 and F-35 fighter jets. Out of nearly 20, only 4 were shot down. And what will happen when there are 800 of them? Kyiv has offered its assistance and readiness to become part of the Eastern European shield. But NATO has a different plan, a plan of its own. And all this just a couple of days before the start of the Russian-Belarusian military exercises. A real simulation of nuclear war near NATO's borders. Moscow and Minsk will be studying the possibility of using the Oreshnik with a nuclear warhead. So did the North Atlantic Alliance pass the test, or rather the trial by fire? Did they realize that Ukraine is the front line of Europe's defense? Or will they still allow the Kremlin to attack NATO countries one by one? And what about Trump? Has he finally realized that Putin is mocking him, as the chief Polish diplomat said? Or is this a deliberate play to the Kremlin? Will this blatant Kremlin attack awaken the collective West, which has been lulled and relaxed? And how can Ukraine help it now? We'll be discussing this in the next hour. This is TSN Week. The more you know, the better armed you are. Greetings to you, indomitable Ukrainians. But first, the front in Ukraine. The situation there is very tense, but there are also things to be glad about. The Russian offensive operation on Sumy was completely thwarted by Ukrainian forces. The president made this statement. In the Dnipropetrovsk region, the Dnipro military group refutes Russian claims that they have captured 11 settlements, although they admit that the occupiers have advanced up to 8 kilometers in some areas. Right now, they are being driven out of the outskirts of Sosnivka, and in the Novopavlivka direction, the 425th Skelia Regiment has liberated the village of Filia. However, in the neighboring Kharkiv region, some groups of occupiers managed to break through to Kupiansk. Russian infantry is entering the city in small groups through the gas pipeline. On social media, their breakthrough is already being called Operation Pipe 3.0. This is a reference to the first 2 such breakthroughs in Avdiivka and Sudza. However, Ukrainian soldiers state that the exits from the gas pipeline in Kupiansk are under their control, and they open fire on the Russians as soon as they arrive. In the north of Kharkiv region, the Carpathia Brigade has learned how to counter drones operating on fiber optics. This was stated to us by the new brigade commander, probably one of the most unexpected Ukrainian commanders, Major Daniel Kitonia.
Victory at last, indeed.
Can you, elaborate a bit more on those breakthroughs, including technological ones that Cartia is dealing with?
The main challenge for us as a brigade was fighting against drones using fiber optics. I can't share all the details with you right now, but we do have certain significant developments that allow us to effectively counter this threat.
An exclusive interview with Daniel Kitonia will be released tomorrow on the TSN Week YouTube channel. Subscribe and leave your comments. And our Andriy Tsaplenko tried to explore the revolutionary technologies that allow our defenders, despite the shortage of personnel, to hold the part of Donetsk region controlled by Ukrainian forces. And it is the 93rd Brigade Kholodny Yar, where Andriy visited, that is now in urgent need of the Vampire. This is a high-tech unmanned aerial system that our forces use to destroy the enemy's front lines, eliminate equipment, and take out enemy personnel. That's why your 10, 20, or even 100 hryvnias donated via this QR code will help our soldiers defend our land and each one of us. Thank you.
Not long ago, you could easily drive down this road to Sloviansk. Now it's better to turn off it. And if you do have to drive on it, put the pedal to the metal. Now FPV drones can reach here. This is warned not only by new road signs, but also by the skeletons of burned-out cars. The enemy systematically targets logistics with drones, with increasing accuracy and deeper strikes. That's why ground robots are now taking on the job of delivering everything needed to the front line.
In such critical missions, effective team coordination and strong crew cohesion play a truly crucial role. It's literally a matter of survival. This is because every additional second spent at the position increases the risk of a dangerous drone strike.
Together with the crew of the 93rd Brigade, we're heading to the loading point. The soldier with the carbine shotgun is watching not so much the sky as the ground. Near Kostiantinivka, quite a few so-called sleeper drones lie in wait in standby mode by the roadside, waiting for high-value targets. And for the Russians, we are a very high-value target. A pickup truck with a ground robot. So the shooter needs to spot the FPV drone immediately, and preferably before it catches up to our pickup.
At this moment, the ground robot is currently being carefully unloaded, and this is considered the most dangerous and riskiest part of the operation, mainly because everything must be done very quickly and efficiently before the enemy's aerial scout has a chance to spot this vehicle.
Sometimes you just can't do without human hands. In just a few minutes, the fighters load heavy logs onto the iron back of their unmanned assistant, and it rather nimbly sets off toward the front line.
Establish contact.
The guys over there will have something to reinforce their dugout with, if the robot makes it.
Go, 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 let's go.
The next mission is just as important and just as risky. In the tunnel under the net, you feel protected from drones, but you have to dash out from under the net into open space. So we stop to check the sky. How's the sky looking?
Clear.
Clear! Alright, good, let's go. Kostiantynivka is a strategically important stronghold for the Ukrainian military. Dozens of aerial bombs fall on the city every day, and Russian drones fly over the maze of streets hunting for the defenders of Kostiantynivka. But their main target is logistics. The starting point was chosen right in Kostiantynivka. From here, a tracked drone will deliver water to a remote observation post. The cargo is already on the platform, to shorten the time when we're exposed to the enemy, like in the palm of their hand. Everything is done quickly. Now this drone will deliver water to the positions, and whether it makes it or not will determine if our guys can hold their positions.
Go, go, go. You can do it. Keep going. You've got this.
The Alter Ego Ground Robotic Systems Company carries out such missions every day. Gradually, all logistics and evacuation in the brigade are being shifted to robots.
Logistics is something that will eventually be the same for all units. People will no longer have to carry mines, mortars themselves. People will receive enough nutritious food and clean water. And please name this card. What card is this?
It's actually the Queen of Spades card.
Okay, it happens. It's nothing. It happens.
The chief engineer of the Kolodny Yar Brigade's ground robotics unit was a professional magician before the war. Now he continues to amaze by having his platforms accomplish tasks with a star, ones that just yesterday were considered impossible.
I can transport 200 kilograms at a time, 300, even half a ton.
But it doesn't always happen that way. If the enemy spots Ukrainian platforms, they unleash an entire arsenal on them, from mines and shells to FPVs and Lancets. They hit the vehicles, evacuating the wounded especially hard and mercilessly. But with a robot, you don't have to risk one life to save another. And the wounded's chances increase too, because robots mean gain time. Without them, sometimes there is no chance of evacuation at all.
If you take a look, for example, at this very combat vehicle of ours, it's already been hit, you see, more than once. There are damages, shrapnel, and traces of FPV strikes.
This thing, as I said, is a legend because it has survived about 11 or 12 FPV strikes.
If those had been people, riflemen, infantrymen, that would have been minus 11 soldiers.
Yeah, that's minus 11 soldiers.
In the area of Kostiantynivka, robots armed with machine guns are starting to carry out assault missions. Just a year ago, such missions were considered impossible.
I didn't believe in it either, but I've already carried out 3 or 4 such operations. Now everyone is arming themselves with machine guns, turrets, and Brownings because they've already seen and understood that it's effective.
Right now, the engineers of the 93rd Brigade are preparing a wheeled robot with an OTS machine gun for deployment. Test firing is underway. The operators are satisfied with the shooting accuracy. Now all that's left is to wait for nightfall and move the drone as close as possible to the enemy's dugouts. Can you hear the microphone? They're not shooting at you, are they?
Not.
The Russians apparently did not expect that someone could get close to them, and at first they did not even return fire from the Ukrainian machine gun. But then apparently they recovered. Noise, noise. The response to the campaign has just been made, but the one who pulls the trigger can't really be reached. He is located kilometers away from the occupiers' positions.
At the moment, it's more of suppressive fire. So yes, we do have confirmed enemy eliminations, but there are shortcomings in reaction speed. That is, it's not something that can be changed in years. There's an electronic component to it.
So the revolution of ground drones hasn't happened yet, but it's already clear what could suddenly bring it closer. Can such systems work with artificial intelligence so that the system itself selects targets?
I'm a bit concerned and afraid of this because right now, at this moment, we simply can't come up with a safeguard that will definitely work in the event that a friendly enters the system's field of view.
However, if Ukrainians are the first to teach such systems to select targets on their own, it will once again change the nature of war and help us hold out in conditions where there is a critical shortage of infantry in the trenches. Andriy Tsaplienko, Ilya Shinkarenko, Serhiy Parfilov, TSN Week, 1+1, Marathon, United News.
Meanwhile, Russia continues to pull NATO's whiskers and does so with impunity. Today, a Russian drone entered Romanian territory and circled there for 50 minutes. The comment from their Minister of Defense really struck me. We scrambled F-16S and were very close to shooting it down. The drone was flying very low, but at some point it turned back toward Ukraine. Although just this spring, Romanian pilots were legally allowed to shoot down drones that violate the country's border. What did this wandering device manage to scout out? What did the Muscovites learn about the Romanian air defense system and their defenses? The minister remained silent, as he did about whether it is still safe for Russians to fly over Romania. I'm afraid that a lot of similar questions remain for Poland as well, which this week faced the most serious challenge so far in the current war, and in fact for the whole of NATO. It seems that the nuclear cudgel the Russians are now brandishing right near the borders of alliance countries is indeed paralyzing it. But for how long? TSN Tishrin correspondent Natalia Yarmola on a moment that could become a turning point in this war.
For the first time, Poland heard the sounds of war this close, this real. Several dozen drones entered not just the airspace of Poland from Ukraine and Belarus, but the entire NATO, penetrating hundreds of kilometers deep.
Russia's recklessness in the air along our eastern flank is becoming increasingly frequent. We have seen drones violate our airspace in Romania, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Whether intentional or not, this is dangerous and unacceptable.
The aerial battle over Poland lasted 7 hours. The Allies are responding with whatever means they have. High-end F-35 fighter jets are repelling attacks from cheap drones. Each missile launch costs about 400,000 euros. The result? Only 4 out of nearly 20 were shot down, forcing the Allies to admit this is a different kind of war, and they only know about it in theory.
This drone attack is truly remarkable and extraordinary. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, we must fully and carefully draw important conclusions from what has happened.
The sky over the eastern part of Poland is being closed to civilian aircraft. The airports in Lublin, Warsaw, and Rzeszów are suspending operations. It is this airport, located near the border with Ukraine, that has become the logistics hub for military aid to Ukraine from its allies.
They might also have done this to prevent partners from supplying air defense systems to Ukraine before winter, demonstrating that we can attack you. You need them too. Does that sound like Putin? Very much so? In my opinion, the scariest thing is that this attack resembles Crimea.
Whether these were reconnaissance gerunds or explosive Shaheds, Polish services will find out in a few days after collecting debris scattered over hundreds of kilometers. Some of them were found near a military base where NATO military aircraft are stationed. The most serious damage from the strike was to the roof of a private house belonging to Polish pensioners. The Russian response really does resemble the well-known "they're not there." They claim they launched drones, but not towards Poland. The handwriting of the Kremlin's hybrid warfare remains unchanged. Along with the UAVs, Poland was attacked by an information special operation. And once again, it was rushed. A lot of Poles believed that Ukraine was to blame, either for not shooting it down or for confusing things with their electronic warfare systems. And only later did the additional fuel tanks and Polish SIM cards inside indicate they didn't get lost, but flew exactly where they were programmed to go. It was precisely these details that Poland's Secretary of State, Marcin Bozaki, pointed out during his speech at the UN Security Council.
We know, and let me be absolutely clear, I repeat, we know that this was not a mistake, not at all.
The raid on Poland happened exactly 1 week after the symbolic parade in China. Symbolic because that's where 3 dictators met: Kim Jong-un, Putin, and Xi Jinping. The world's media called this meeting the day a new axis of evil was created. Moscow's strategic goal is the collapse of NATO and the EU. Does Beijing want this? Military analyst Mikhailo Samus is convinced yes. And he adds, without China's approval, Putin would not have dared to do something like this.
Without actually signing any formal agreements, they have clearly established themselves, and it's obvious that China, well, China has clearly stated that this is beneficial for them. Why is it beneficial? Because China, which is trying to become a leader, needs to knock the United States off its pedestal. In other words, the United States on one side, Europe on the other. Because in fact, China's main goal is to dethrone the US and enter the European market.
And to some extent, they have succeeded. NATO's unity was called into question by Donald Trump's response. He called the presence of nearly 20 drones in Poland a likely mistake. It's worth noting here that Warsaw has always considered Washington its closest ally. In Brussels, they are trying to find a definition for what happened. Incident, incursion, aggression, provocation. The response will depend on this. This is not enough for Article 5. Poland calls Russia's actions an act of aggression and requests the activation of Article 4, meaning consultations. It took 3 days to formulate a response, which led many to question the alliance's resolve. But the response from NATO's Supreme Allied Commander Europe, General Alexis Grinkewicz, the military operation Eastern Sentinel, satisfied the allies.
Eastern Sentinel will be highly flexible and adaptable, providing even more specifically targeted deterrence and robust defense capabilities, exactly when and precisely where it is most urgently needed. It will include additional enhanced capabilities. It will integrate air and ground defense, as well as increase information sharing between countries.
The very next morning, the Polish General Staff released footage of a French A-400 transport plane landing in Minsk Mazowiecki with weapons for Rafale fighter jets. And NATO has launched large-scale exercises involving the deployment of troops and equipment to Lithuania to test response speed, compatibility, and to enhance combat readiness. At the same time, on the other side of the border, the Russians and Belarusians are conducting their own maneuvers. At the end of the week, a whole delegation of foreign guests arrives in the capital. These are representatives from the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Italy, Denmark, Poland, and Finland. US Special Representative Keith Kellogg narrowly avoided a Russian drone attack in Poland while on his way to Ukraine. With the President of Ukraine, they discussed strengthening air defense, security guarantees, and sanctions. The last point should serve as an asymmetric response to Russian escalation, Zelensky insists. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is lifting sanctions from Belarusian Belavia and issuing a new ultimatum, this time to the allies. He claims he will hit the Russian economy with sanctions if Europe stops buying oil. Europeans understand no one in the world except the Ukrainian army knows how to repel attacks from Russian drones and missiles.
There just aren't that many missiles.
To shoot down all the different types of drones, Poland's Patriots won't provide assistance against Shaheds, and they won't help anyone.
This is purely a weapon against ballistic missiles.
So Poland is asking Ukraine for joint training in drone defense.
NATO is not at war with Russia, but Russia is at war with NATO through Ukraine. This situation has united Europe, Poland, and the NATO bloc. We will not abandon our Ukrainian friends and are ready to strengthen and expand our military cooperation in the defense sector.
And that's a good thing, because whenever I hear that Ukraine shouldn't be in NATO, I always say in Poland, on the contrary, we need Ukraine to be in NATO, not the other way around.
However, Putin's provocation has given Ukraine yet another strong argument. To prevent such attacks, the defense of the eastern flank of NATO must include Ukraine, at least its western regions. This Friday, Putin and Lukashenko began rehearsing for nuclear war and an attack on NATO. The Zapad 2025 exercises are forcing Poland to fence off its border with barbed wire and to close it for both entry and exit. Similarly, the airspace along the border is closed to flights both in Poland and in the neighboring Baltic countries. 18,000 soldiers, including 5,500 Russians, are preparing to test the new Oreshnik missile system. And without hiding it, they are practicing an offensive on NATO's weakest point, the Suwałki corridor. This is a stretch only 60 kilometers wide. It's the shortest route to Kaliningrad through the territories of Poland and Lithuania. Russian and Belarusian allied forces are training to seize it for the so-called protection of the Russian enclave in Europe.
The target of these exercises, among other things, is the well-known Suwałki corridor. It is precisely this corridor that the simulated operations are targeting. So far, they are only simulated operations.
The Polish Prime Minister used the phrase, "so far," for a reason, because twice in history, such exercises ended with a Russian invasion, in 2008 in Georgia and in 2022 in Ukraine. NATO's General Staff does not consider such scenarios. However, Zapad 2025 will continue until September 16th. The alliance declares its readiness to respond to any provocations. Putin made it clear exactly where NATO allies should keep a close watch, and recent events have given a clear answer to the question, who will defend Europe? Natalia Yarmola, Volodymyr Ostapenko, TSN, Week 1+1, Marathon, United News.
Meanwhile, let's turn our attention to the bastion of democracy, our main strategic partner, the United States. President Trump's reaction to the incursion of Russian drones into Poland has clearly unsettled European capitals, according to Reuters. There they took note of Trump's refusal to publicly call on Moscow to answer for the incident. And now many NATO members are already questioning his willingness to defend them in the event of a real Russian attack. And at the end of the week, Trump also put forward conditions for NATO and the EU, under which he would supposedly be willing to impose serious sanctions against the Kremlin. TSN's own correspondent in Washington, Olha Koshelenko, has the latest news. She is joining us live. Olya, hello. So, what are these conditions, how many are there, and how realistic is it that they could be fulfilled? Or is this just a way to wash his hands of the situation when all talks with Putin are failing?
Yes, Ala. Yesterday, Trump made a post on Truth Social that some media outlets here even called an ultimatum. In it, Trump addresses not even the European Union, which is important, but NATO, with a proposal to stop buying Russian energy resources. Because after China and India, which are the top two buyers of Russian oil products, Turkey is in third place. Turkey is a NATO member and a major trading partner of Russia. And the fourth and fifth places are also held by Russia's friends and not strangers to Trump, Hungary and Slovakia. Trump also proposes in this open letter to impose high trade tariffs on China. Let's listen to the main points from his address to NATO.
As you know, NATO's desire for victory was far less than 100%, and the purchase of Russian oil by some countries was shocking. This significantly weakens your negotiating position and bargaining power with respect to Russia. In any case, I am ready to begin whenever you are ready. Just let me know when. I believe that this, as well as NATO, as a group imposing tariffs on China ranging from 50 to 100%, which would be completely lifted after the end of Russia's war with Ukraine, would also greatly help to end this deadly but senseless war.
It is noteworthy that this letter did not appear out of nowhere, but followed this week's visit to Washington by a delegation of high-ranking European officials who, according to CNN, met here both with Trump himself and with officials at lower levels of government. Trump is finally on our side. An EU official shared this optimistic statement with Politico on condition of anonymity. And by the way, the article itself is titled, "Trump finally wants to put pressure on Russia." Now comes the hardest part. The difficulty, according to EU officials who are speaking here on condition of anonymity, lies in the difference in approaches. The EU and the United States have different views. Europe is seeking formal sanctions specifically against Russia and is ready to go through with it. But the United States wants to impose tariffs against China as a major trading partner of the European Union. But that's not in their interests. By the way, Trump did not mention India in his post on Truth Social, which I just talked about, because right now the EU is moving closer to a major trade agreement with India, and it doesn't look like they're ready to give that up.
This is economically and politically impossible for the EU. Such a move would contradict the core principles of the EU, especially after the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, reiterated her opposition to tariffs, insisting that tariffs are taxes on domestic consumers. Imposing tariffs on India, with whom Brussels is nearing a major trade agreement, and on China, on which its open economy heavily depends, would be tantamount to colossal acts of self-harm.
As for the purchase of Russian oil by Turkey, as well as primarily by Hungary, it also does not seem that they are ready or will be ready to give it up. Other European Union countries have already significantly reduced their purchases. Europe also consumes Russian liquefied natural gas. Trump did not mention this in his post referenced above. However, American media report that this week he suggested Europe should also give up this type of energy resource and replace it with American liquefied natural gas. There has not yet been a formal response from the EU to Trump's ultimatum. A spokesperson for the European Commission said that negotiations are ongoing in this manner. However, Trump is flying to the United Kingdom next week, and perhaps the negotiations can continue there as well. Hello.
And against the backdrop of the Russian-Belarusian military exercises, the Trump-Lukashenko line is interesting, lifting sanctions from the Belarusian airline, the release of prisoners, and cufflinks from Trump featuring the White House. How do people in the States explain this bouquet of mutual friendly gestures?
Hello, that's a very interesting question. The way the United States is currently handling the Belarusian dictator can no longer go unnoticed. Trump himself spoke with Lukashenko on the phone. He sent his special representative to him with various gifts, which you just mentioned. These included a letter personally signed by Trump and cufflinks featuring the White House. By the way, you can buy such cufflinks at the White House souvenir shop. Really nothing special, but it pleased Lukashenko. As well as the lifting of sanctions against Russia and against the Belarusian company Belavia, which the United States also implemented this week. As experts here say, this is primarily an opportunity for Lukashenko to buy spare parts for his plane, so it's also a gift to Putin's junior partner. The question is, why do Trump and the United States need this? Formally, we see that Lukashenko has already released his political prisoners twice, those who have languished in Belarusian prisons since the mass protests of 2020. And although Trump also mentions this publicly, there is no reason to believe that Belarusian citizens hold any special value for the United States. Among the interesting theories I've heard here, there is one that says the United States is trying to use its flirtation with Lukashenko to separate him from Putin and to show how beneficial it is to make deals with America. The idea is that Lukashenko trades his political prisoners and gains benefits from it. So, do you think this example will teach Putin anything?
Well, that's almost a rhetorical question, but we'll see. And finally, one more question about the high-profile murders in the States and the escalating confrontation between Republicans and Democrats. To what extent can this domestic issue knock Trump off the international agenda? The video of the murder of the Ukrainian woman, as it turned out, was released much later after the tragedy. Is this a coincidence or a specific plan? What does the toothy American press say about this?
Yes, hello. The murder of 23-year-old Irina Zarutska took place back on August 22nd. But the surveillance footage from the train where the murder actually happened was released only 2 weeks later. In the footage, by the way, Zarutska sat in the train car in front of the black man, De Carlos Brown. They had no contact, there was no interaction at all. But at some point, he suddenly got up and stabbed her 3 times. Very soon after, the girl lost consciousness and died. The attacker has been arrested. He is mentally ill and claims that he has a chip in his brain and that the Ukrainian woman he killed supposedly knew all his thoughts. This story really gained publicity when the President of the United States took an interest in it. That's when the video was released. Trump had just declared war on street crime in America, mostly in cities governed by his Democratic opponents, such as Washington and Chicago. So Zarutska became something of a symbol of this fight. This wave was somewhat dampened by another high-profile murder, this time a political one. A close associate of Trump, MAGA blogger Charlie Kirk, was shot dead. He was shot right in the middle of a public speech in front of students in Utah. Among the motives of the 22-year-old man who allegedly committed this crime, who was detained and is accused of murder, were politics and disagreement with the blogger's views. On the shotgun that was found as the weapon of the crime, it was allegedly engraved with, "Hey fascists, catch this." And these two very different crimes have taken on significant political resonance in the United States. The internal confrontation in the country is truly palpable, and a new political season is beginning. Next year, there will be midterm elections for control of Congress, which could change a lot in the internal political landscape. After all, both chambers of Congress are currently controlled by the Republicans. So it seems that the domestic agenda will take up a significant portion of Trump's attention. Hello.
Thank you, Olya. TSN's own correspondent in the United States, Olha Koshelenko, has taken the political temperature in Washington. And as we can see, there really is a reason for us and the Europeans to be concerned. Thank you. And while the American president shifts responsibility for sanctions onto Europe, Ukraine is methodically depleting the oil resources of the so-called gas station countries. Last night, drone forces struck one of Russia's largest oil refineries. It's located here in the Leningrad region, that is 800 kilometers from Ukraine's state border. This oil refinery is the main supplier of fuel not only for the residents of St. Petersburg and the region, but also for the neighboring Novgorod and Pskov regions. The local governor stated that 3 drones were shot down. However, the high-precision debris caused a fire, which was quickly extinguished. Whether the locals believe the words of the Russian official is unknown, because as you can see in these shots, the blaze was intense. The pillar of fire could be seen from several kilometers away. The capable drones also reached Ufa, and that's 1,400 kilometers away. And this facility, all the way near the Ural Mountains, was considered completely safe. And here the important question isn't the mocking one to the Kremlin, so where is your air defense, but rather a question in response to the Russians' hysterical outcries. What on earth is happening? It's easy to support a war when you're not the one being killed. It's a completely different story when it comes back to your own home. Well, the drones easily struck the local Bashneft plant and left a city of 1 million people without industrial water. But the most notable success of the defense forces this week was the key export hub for Russia on the Baltic Sea, the port of Primorsk. It's essentially home to Russia's shadow fleet. It was thanks to this port that Russia so successfully circumvented international sanctions. And now the port has come to a halt, and the security service has once again shown that nothing is impossible for them. A raid by Ukrainian drones struck 2 ships at once, both sailing under the flag of the Seychelles and transporting Russian oil around the world. Every year, this port brought up to $15 billion to Putin's war machine. So even a temporary shutdown of the port, even if it is only for a brief period of time, seriously undermines the Kremlin's hopes of keeping its own economy afloat, because clearly the security service will not stop here.